The start of this video you find us in Guernsey, enjoying sunsets and fine anchorages, but boat work never ends and some long-standing issues need to be tackled. Later in the voyage we'll explore what happened to our huge Victron 12-volt boat supply in heavy seas off Start Point and how we went about tracing the fault and fixing it at sea. But first, in the Channel Isles we have other boat issues to fix. And I'm doing some work on the generator. We had a problem a couple of days ago, started it and it ran okay for a while and then it cut out, and it seemed to be very hot in here, so I was checking water. There seems to be water in the intake pipe, so it's filled up here, but there's steam coming out of the exhaust and I can't tell whether there's actually water coming out. The exhaust was getting warm but not super hot, so I'm suspecting the impeller at the moment. And the problem with the impeller and having to change it is I've been telling myself, yeah, you must cut a hatch in this side to get at the impeller, because you're bound to have to change one at a time. And the job to take this out is taking all the exhaust pipe out of the top, disconnecting all these connectors here, unbolting on the underside, shuffling it across, twisting it around so I can get in at the end. There's just not enough space to get in. I've tried it a few times. Down in this side here, there's the offending article is behind there, so I need access to it. So I think I'm going to have to bite the bullet and put a hatch in this side. I've taken the piece I wanted to out of the side of the generator, see it here, and so I can get access to this, which is the impeller. Without that it's very difficult to get into it. But nothing found wrong with the impeller. It's cut reasonably square. This is where the light switch was. I'm going to move that up to there when I do the rearrangement of all the woodwork. And what I'll do is I'll epoxy the edge of this so it doesn't get any water in it. So this is the impeller for the generator, the new one. I'm putting it in. So that's the hole lined with foil tape. I've done the same with the lid, so it can all go back in there now. And I'm just going to tape it up temporarily, ready, and we'll get a piece of finishing timber to do that when we're back in Plymouth. So we're back into this hatch to see what's going on with the generator. It's still running hot. Don't think it's drawing water. So today's little task was to sort out why the Jenny was overheating and shutting out. So I'll give it a service. I have one of these oil pumps. I've drained the sump. I have sucked it out with that. I've put a new oil filter on. I was in and checked the impeller. That's very recent, that one, so nothing wrong with that. There's intake water coming from the seacock, so it's not that. And so I've continued with looking at the engine. The manual suggests making sure that the heat exchanger is clear. So I've taken photographs, shined a torch through here, and there is a little bit of build up in there, but not very much. They're all mostly clear, but quite a lot of pressure when you blow through the system from the pump to this pipe, which is the intake to the heat exchanger. This pipe from the end of the heat exchanger up to the exhaust seems fine. Nothing really that indicated what was going on until I blew down this pipe, which goes from here and joins at the back of the generator to go into the actual generator itself. The electrical part gets cooled and then comes out and goes into the exhaust system. And when I blew through that, I couldn't really blow particularly easily. And at the back of there is this Y junction which has a filter in it, and the filter was completely clogged. And the reason it's clogged is because it's got such a fine mesh on it. I've cleaned it up and it now seems to flow really well, but I think that's too fine a filter for a raw water intake. There is already one on our intake on the seacock, So I'm not sure whether I really want to put that back in, but it did capture a piece of broken impeller that I had from a previous incident. So I'm going to put it back in. It does flow water, and I'll remember that's where to look if the engine's overheating first thing, rather than taking the rest of the generator apart. So this is where all the crud is, at the bottom of this little cap on the top of the filter. This is the hatch, basically finished now. I've fitted everything back up together, so it's slightly lighter than the unit that came out of it, but I think it looks okay. Gives me access, got a little handle in it. Today we've got the unsavoury task of sorting out the job scope toilet pump. So this pump's been working really well for a while, and then we've been putting oil down the toilet, so vegetable oil went down the toilet, and then in here and on the shaft I've been putting Vaseline, but I think the Vaseline has basically made the rubber stopper that's underneath here collapse. It's getting really hard to pump, so we're going to take this one out, and I've got a new one to replace it with, and then Mary's she's volunteered to clean the inside of the pump, and we'll reservice it because I've got a service kit as well. So they're really easy to take out. These, there's just 3 big screws on the bottom, and they're just like a self-tapper into the plastic, and 2 at the back, and the whole thing comes out, and you can just replace it with a new one, as we've got. The only thing is you've got to make sure you get the right spares for these. I think it's all to do with the colour around the label. If it's a black one, it's after 2007. Before that, you've got different types of kits, so they come in different sizes, I guess, and types. They are a bit awkward to get at the screws, because you need a long screwdriver to get to the screw behind here, so be aware of that. You can't just get in, or a short stubby screwdriver would probably do it, a flathead. That's what you need to get them out. The pump actually unscrewed, so it's loose here, but you've still got 2 hoses to deal with. 2 clips undone, and I just need to get these hoses off. If they don't come off easily, you just put a heat gun on them, and the heat's enough to just soften them. You should be able to pull them off. These are the repair kits. So you've got, this is the one we've got, which is a black labelled one, and there's a blue labelled one which is 1998, and the earliest one's a 1986, which has a red label on it, and you get all the bits in it. The joker valve, as it's called, ha ha ha. I don't think it's any joke really when it doesn't work properly. It's a non-return rubber valve, and then there's a top for it, and I think you get the flutter valves that are inside it that let the water go backwards and forwards, and various O seals and things like that. So all pump out, pull the hoses off, and that's what you're left with. You've got to replace those. We'll do a clean round there before we put that back together. Mary's out with the bleach to go into the bucket. And these are the parts that dismantled the pump. Not that bad inside, but the main problem we've been having is with
bleach on it, Paul.
Is with this. See the top of it. That's basically what was left of the shock absorber seal that goes on the top of there. So yeah, so it's getting a hot water from the kettle. It'll get left in there for a while. We'll do the other pump at the same time, I think, as well. So the new pump comes with a new elbow on it. There's already one in here, so I'm not going to bother changing that, because it connects to a pipe under the floor, and that'll be difficult to get to. I know it will. So, and it's had a new pipe on it recently anyway. So we just put that back on, replace this part with the piece that's in the bolt in there, and clamp it up. And it's just a case of screwing it all back together again. Fairly straightforward. And now he's working hard on the little bits with a toothbrush. I hope nobody ever uses that toothbrush.
No, this is my scrubby toothbrush.
Do you need some solvent on that rubbery stuff on the top there?
I might do, but I'm not. Oh God.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, blue roll. I'll wipe it off. Take it off with blue roll.
Okay. So joker valve goes back in here, and that seals on the back of that, and this flange comes up, and you just screw into the back of that. So that's the pump all back together, screws in, and we've checked that there's no leaks. So we're heading away from the Channel Isles, heading back to the UK for about a month, just to get some things sorted on the boat, some jobs we've got to do before we go deep south. Crossing the channel, we're expecting to see some of the Fastnet fleet. What sort of a day we're looking forward to, Skipper?
A fast day, hopefully, so we can get in before it gets dark, but that's unlikely.
Yeah.
So we'll wait to see what happens.
What's the situation?
Oh, it's nice at the moment. We've got the tide with us. We've got about 9 knots of wind with us. And we're, it's going nicely at the moment, so we'll wait and see.
So, Mary's pretty chipper about what we're doing. I guess the downside later in the day is that the wind's due to go northerly on us. So when we get past the traffic separation zone, which is just beyond Alderney, we've got to make a choice whether to go against the tide and go east, or go with the tide and go west, and then have to come around Portland Bill, because we're heading for Portland. We don't have an angle on the wind to get any further west, so we're going to the place where we've got the best chance, and we've got to go back in the UK in a registered port, so that's our plan. How are the plants feeling about this? You guys good? Yes, looking fairly sprightly, all nice and green, been watered recently, so they're looking good. We're also doing a bit of cockpit navigation today. You just never know what conditions you're going to see offshore, so we tend to have the logbook up here and some navigation charts and things, just in case it's too rough to get down below. But you can normally get down there, but it's just quite uncomfortable at times, so we tend to navigate from up here if we can. And that's our situation. We're doing 5 knots through the water and 6.5 over the ground. And on the left hand side there you can see we've got 9-10 knots of wind off on the beam, which is great. And this is a typical channel crossing traffic. So here's we're closing on this cargo vessel. We radioed him just to see what his intentions were, and kindly he said he's going to speed up, although with the I've actually just dropped my speed back a little bit because he was only going to be about 50 metres clear of me, so that's too close to one of these big boats.
Just start going again now.
And as you can see from this shot of the screenshot, we are quite close there. You can see all the traffic moving around makes it quite complicated to get yourself across some of these traffic separation zones. Now we're shorting the lines out. We're just leaving Portland early. We got in late last night and we're heading probably to Dartmouth or Salcombe. Very racy looking boat there, could be one of the Fastnet boats. This entrance to Portland looks fairly innocent in these shots, but we touched ground last night at about 11:30 at night, and the significance of that will become clear in the next video. Heading up to start point, who did we spy on the AIS but young Katie McCabe in her beautifully restored yacht Philander, in which she became the youngest person to circumnavigate the UK single-handed. So, a bit of a head scratcher yesterday when we were coming around start point, bouncing up and down in probably 2 metre chop, wind against tide. All the 12 volt system basically cut out. This board was completely blank, no lights on apart from that blue light, and in the fuse box this light here, which is for the winch control, which is on a slightly different circuit than the others. So, bit of a panic. Mary had to hand steer, the autopilot was off.
I'm on the iPad.
And Mary was navigating on the iPad. And I came down below in this bouncy sea to figure out what was going on. So I checked the feeds in here, and I was obviously getting a feed to this one because you can see the light on there. Everything else was dark, nothing between the earth connector here, which I've taken the cover off, and any of the fuses. I I thought, oh, it's bound to be one of these switches that's gone wrong, so I tried flipping those, nothing happening there. I then had to lift this panel out and get into the back of the switch to check what was there. There's nothing live at the back of those apart from the feed for the winch system. Checked that the Victron system's working okay, looked at that and saw that the solar panels were actually connected. So that's the yellow ones here. They were providing power to charge the Victron batteries. So it didn't look like it was Victron system. The inverter was working. I had a light up here showing that the inverter was working as it is this morning. So yeah, so still pointing to the blue boxes under the floor here. So I got my trusty voltmeter out, having pulled out loads of screws and things like that in an attempt to find out what was going on. I was opened up and had a look in here. It takes a little bit to strip stuff out to get at it, but there were blue flashing lights going on, so there was obviously action from the BMS. I checked the voltages at the output from the battery system and they're all good. The other side of the shunts and switches is good. I'm getting power across the terminals at the back of the links units here, and I checked continuity across each of these fuses. They're all good. So then where does the power come from? Well, basically the battery supplies everything through this lead and this pair of leads, and they come in here, which feeds the bus bars. The power from the inverter, if we're running 12 volt charge to charge, comes in here, and then everything else goes out from here. So you've got your main earth running out from there, and all the positive leads come out through here, and they go through what's called a battery protect. So there's a battery protect here for the main batteries and one for the engine batteries, I think it is that one. And it's just a simple cover that I just left up here. So what did I find? Well, I checked first of all that the battery, that the system was giving power to the BMS, which is this one, and these yellow leads are the control cables. They were all working, and I touched this lead and I got an instant bleep from the systems. So this thing was the fault that we found. So I've cut it away since then, but it had one of these plastic caps on it, like this black plastic cap, just so that if anything fell in there it didn't immediately arc. This was warm, and it obviously cooled down since the incident, because it was probably about half an hour later when I got to this point. So that's what it was. I tightened it down and everything worked okay. So now I've got to fix that by taking off the nut, putting new nuts in, cleaning everything up, putting it back together again. And it's interesting because I've tested all these systems for heat on connectors and things. I do it quite regularly, but I hadn't actually done this while we were underway because it's difficult to get the floor panel out, and there's a lid that goes across here and all sorts of plastic covers to protect everything. It's quite difficult to do that when you're under passage. So I've not actually been checking everything under higher load when we're on passage, and everything was working quite hard because we were in a difficult point, off start point, with the waves bouncing around. The autopilot was working extra hard, and obviously quite a lot of current going through the systems, and that must have worked itself loose over a period of time. So I'll be putting a spring washer on the top of that, stop that moving anymore, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Problem solved. Phew. Mary was very happy when it started bleeping again.
Oh, definitely. You haven't got any depth on iPads. You've got speed over the ground, and you've got you can see depth in colours of things, but you haven't got a proper depth gauge
for where you are now.
So I knew we were safe enough, and then it's just hand steering, which takes a lot more to do than you realise. You forget how much hand steering needs. Especially, and the other problem is in that sea.
You can't see the tide that you've got pushing you, so you can't get an apparent course.
No, we knew roughly where the tide was pushing us, but I was just playing on wind then.
Cool. Anyway, all ended happily. But now we've got to just do a little repair here and then we'll be all good. So what do I use to check what's going on in this powerful battery bank? Well, I have one of these little infrared laser thermometer things. So you point and basically it'll tell you the temperature. So the floor here is 19.5. If I look at some of the components in here, it's 20. The bus bars, it's normally the connectors where you would have looked. There's another 20. So investigating this nut, when I check the terminals for wobble, I just pull the wires and just see whether there's anything moving. The fact that I was doing that when the battery terminals was cool meant that the plastic had hardened, filled the gap where the washer where it would have been loose, and felt firm to me. So I missed it. Interesting. So these battery terminal covers are not all they're cracked up to be, and you need to remove them, then test the wobble. But yeah, we'll keep that as a souvenir. Yeah, we've learnt, but it was a difficult place to find the problem, that's for sure. The boat was probably jumping up and down every 2-3 seconds and bashing on a wave, so not really very comfortable down here to do electrical testing. I was fearful of dropping something into the batteries as well, so all the protection covers and things, I had to remove those to get at the fault. So that's the lid back on, and it's held in by these screw bolts that holds the whole glass fibre box that's around it, around the batteries in place. Just shows you how many boats are here in Salcombe. We're down in the bag around the corner there. Looks like Salcombe's falling apart. Big landslide here. Bit dangerous. Doesn't look like anybody was hurt or anything, but yeah, pretty spectacular. We're off to the shop. This is heading out of Salcombe this morning early. It's about 5:45. Which is quite still. There's a little bit of wind on us. We were moored up in this end of what's called the Bag, which is quite a nice sheltered spot. Everybody got moved in here before yesterday's storm overnight. It's been quite nice, very calm in there, quiet. So is Skipper happy this morning?
So far?
Anything to say?
It's nice and flat this morning. The breeze.
Why are we up at 5:35 then?
To try and get back before the wind comes. And we're going with the tide as much as we can.
Okay, so Mary's passage plan, go with the tide. Try and avoid the strong wind. This job was commissioning the water maker, which we've had fitted for a long time. We've just never got round to commissioning it. This is it running. Seems very loud over the video, but it's not that noisy as it is in the technical room and normally behind a door. And it's producing water. This is the control panel, and when pressure is in the green, with a green light on, it's delivering 60 litres per hour of fresh water to the water tanks. So commissioning it was relatively easy. Nothing too major was a problem. This is the intake filter. So we hadn't filled that up at all. So there's a valve on the far side, and there's a seacock under the floor down here, which you have to open. And then there's also a valve. So if you turn this valve right back the other way, it lets fresh water in here to flush. And this pipe here lets seawater in, and that's what you use. That's what the system uses to extract the salty water, the brine water, and leave you with clear water. And there's a little solenoid here that the electronics can control, so that can switch you on with fresh water to flush the system. So it's a relatively easy system. The only problems I had was I had a slight leak here, hadn't sealed that properly, so that was my fault. And just made sure this was tight, and I checked that this was sealed completely, because I was getting a little bit of air in the system, and that was stopping us getting to top pressure. I did have a very small drip here on this, and I think I need to put some sort of divider in here, because I don't really want water. I hadn't thought about this before, but I don't really want water from the desalinator running or getting spraying out of here if there was a burst. So I'm going to put a divider in here between the solar panel stuff and the water maker, just to isolate the two. The thing I've checked is there's quite a bit of pipework under here. There's a feed for the cold water sampling tap. There's also a feed that goes under the floor here and tees into the pipework for the cold water tank. So that's under there, that's what's basically feeding in now from the system. Also check the pipework from the seacock under here and up to the water filter, the inlet for water filter. And then there's also a discharge which comes from the back of the panel over here. So it comes from there and goes down under the floor, under here, pops out here, goes up this seat and then into the back of here, and there's actually a spare seacock that we've used to discharge the brine, which is the really salty water that comes out of the process. So you get fresh water out of half of it, and there's a lot of brine comes out, which is very salty water. It's a good booklet comes with it when you get it. I used this to install it, but this is basically the process. So you basically switch it on, and there's lights come up here initially, and they flash on and on slightly and then go off. And you make sure that you've got this knob turned right back down, and then once it's on, and you can use either 12 volt or 24 volt power, then you can turn the pressure thing up, and this little dial here goes up until you get it into the green area, and then there should be a green light comes on here, and that means it's working okay. To get a yellow light, it means it's not good enough quality, so it means it's substandard in terms of parts per million. And once it goes green, it means it's good enough to drink. Blowy! Not very nice today.
Hi, seems like ages ago, doesn't it?
Yes, it is quite a while. We did so much work after we came back from the Channel Isles, and that the director
split it up into smaller videos so you don't get bored.
So this is the first of a series of technical videos on what we did during that time.
We think the generator is solved and the water maker is working well.
The Victron issue, I think, was just a one-off. We'll check and make sure that's the case. While at the time the touching ground issue in Portland seemed a fairly minor affair, it actually turned into much more work, and you'll see more of that in coming videos.
So until then, fair winds and following seas from Gran Canaria.
Bye.
Bye.
Right, okay, we can stop playing cards now. On the sly. Did so much work after we came back from the Canary Isle, from the let's try again, start again.
Channel Isles. Oh, for goodness sake, come on.